Continuing with Book 3, Chapter 69, verse 33. Now, as Suchi was wandering about in the sky, her aerial form, which was big with her heinous ambition, disappeared in air like vapor, or like a thick cloud in autumn. Then, entering the body of some sensualist, or weak, or too fat a person, this inward colic flatulence of Suchi assumes the shape of cholera. Sometimes she enters the body of a lean person, but also in those of healthier and wise people, first appearing as a choleric pain, then becoming real cholera at last. She is often delighted to take her seat in the hearts of the ignorant, but afterwards she is driven back by good acts and prayers and mantras and medicines of the wise. In this manner, she continued to many years in her rambles. Sometimes her two-part body, pin and cholera, flies in the air, but most often she creeps low on the ground. She lies concealed in the dust of the ground and under the fisted fingers of hands. She hides herself in sunbeams, in air, and in threads of cloths. She is hidden in the intestines, entrails, and genitals. She resides in the bodies of pale and ash-colored persons. She lives in the pores, lines, and lineaments of the body, and also in dry grass, and in the dried beds of rivers. She has her seat among the injured, and in the naked and uncovered bodies of men, and those who are subject to hard breathing. She dwells in places infested by flies and of obstructed ventilation, and also in green verdures, excepting only mango and wood apple trees. She lurks in places scattered with bones and joints of animal bodies, and such as are disturbed by violent winds and gusts of air. She lies in dirty places and in cold and icy grounds, and likewise in polluted cloths and places polluted by them. She sits in holes and hollow places, withered trees, and spots infested by crows, flies, and peacocks. Also in places of dry, humid, and high winds, and in benumbed fingers and toes. She is in cloudy regions, in cavernous districts of the form of rotten bodies, in regions of melting and driving snows, and in marshy grounds abounding in ant hills and hills of malura trees. She exhibits herself in the mirage of desert sand and in wildernesses abounding with ravenous beasts and snakes. Sometimes she is seen in lands infested by venomous reptiles, disgusting leeches, and worms. She frequents stagnant pools soiled by dry leaves, and those chewed by pishaka goats. She haunts hovels beside road crossings where passengers halt and take shelter from the cold. She rambles in all places. Everywhere leeches suck the blood of men and invile people tear at them with their nails and hold them in their fists to feed upon them. In this manner, she is everywhere in the landscape of cities until she is tired with her long journey through them. Then she stops in her course like a tired bullock whose body is hot from traveling through towns with loads of cotton and utensils on its back. She lays down to rest in some hidden places, like a needle, tired with continued sewing. There she drops down like thread from the hand of the sewer. A hard needle held in the hand of the sewer never hurts his finger, because a servant, however sharp he may be, is never faithless or injurious to his master. An iron needle grown old in its business of stitching was at last lost by itself, like the rotten plank of a boat, bearing the burdensome ballast of stones in it. It wandered about on all sides of its own accord and was driven to and fro like chaff from the driving winds, according to the course of nature. Someone takes up and feeds the last end of a thread in its mouth. The malady of cholera is caught by human parasites who glut themselves with the food supplies by the sap of another. The malady of colic, like the needle, is ever fond of feeding with its open mouth on the pith of others. It continually finds the thread-like heartstring of somebody put into its hole. Thus, the strong bodies of greedy and heinous beings are nourished by the sap of the weak and innocent, just like colic disease preys on the lean bodies of the poor, and the sharp needle is supported by the thin thread of the needy who cannot afford to buy new suits. Though the heart of Suchi, like the whole of the needle, was to receive a thread-like sap of the patient's heart, yet her power to pierce was like that of the sewing needle, which is potent as the piercing sunbeams to penetrate into the toughest substances. Suddenly, at last, Suchi came to find the fault of her wrong choice for a puny body, which was filled with her scanty fare of a bit of thread. She began to repent her folly. However, she continued with all her might to trudge on in her accustomed course of pricking and piercing the bodies of others. In spite of her great regret, she could not avoid the cruelty of her nature. The sewing man cuts and sews the cloth agreeable to his own liking, but the weaver of destiny weaves the long loom of lengthened desires in all bodies and hides their reason under the garb of his own making. The colic Suchi went on like the sewing needle in her business of piercing the hearts of people by hiding her head, just like it is the practice of robbers to carry on their rogueries by covering their faces. She, like the needle with her sewing thread behind it, raised her head to make and look at the loophole that she should penetrate, like burglar, making and marking holes in the wall for their entry. She entered the bodies of the weak and strong alike. Like the needle stitching cloths of all textures, just as it is the custom of the wicked to spare neither the just nor unjust. Colic pain, like the piercing needle, being pressed under the fingers, lets off its gripping like the thread of the needle in its act of sewing. The acute and unfeeling colic, being as ignorant of the softness or dryness of the object as the stiff and heartless needle, pierces the hardiest breast without deriving any sweetness from it. The needle is comparable to a rich widow. Both are equally stern and full of remorse. Both are equally veiled and speechless. And their eyes, and their eye of the needle are as empty as their joyless hearts. The needle hurts nobody, yet she is dragged by the thread, which is no other than the thread of her fate. After her trudging slipped from the finger of her master, the needle peacefully sleeps in company with her fellows of dirt and dregs. For who is there who, when he is out of work, does not deem himself blessed to be in the company of his equal? The herd of common people is ever fond of mixing with the ignorant rabble because there is nobody who can avoid the company of his equals. The lost needle, when found by a blacksmith and heated in the hearth, flies to heaven by the breath of the bellows, after which it disappears in the air. In this manner, the current of vital airs, by force of the acts of its prior states of existence, conducts the breath of life into the heart, which becomes the living spirit. The vital airs, being diminished in the body, cause the colic pains known by different names, such as flatulence, bile, and the like. The colic is caused by spoiling the dhyana vital energy, produces many diseases and effects, and all the members of the body with its watery fluid. When it affects the lungs, breathing, it causes the vaya sula, or pulmonary colic, and is attended by disfigurement of the body and an insanity or hysteria known as the hysteric colic. Sometimes it comes to the hand of sheep keepers or by the smell of sheep's wool in blankets. At other times, it seizes the fingers of children and causes them to tear their bedclothes. When it enters the body through the foot, it continues sucking blood and with all its voracity becomes satisfied with very little food. It lies in the glandular vessel of the feces with its mouth placed downward and takes as its prerogative any form it likes to assume. It is the nature of malicious people to show the perversion of their hearts by doing injury to others. It is the characteristic of base people to raise a row for their pleasure and not for any gain or good to themselves. The miserly think much of their gain of even a single penny. So deeply rooted is the avaricious selfishness of human nature. It was only for a particle of blood, or as much as could be picked out by the point of a pen, that the Karkati was bent on the destruction of men. So the wise are fools in their own interest. How great is my master's stroke, says the needle, that I have come from stitching the threads on the cloth to piercing the hearts of men. So be it, I am happy at my success. As the rust of the lazy needle passes off in sewing without being rubbed with dust, so must it rust unless it is put into the action of piercing, patient, and passive shreds. The unseen and airy darts of fate are as fatal as the acts of cruel advanced cholera, though both have their respite of their massacres at short intervals. The needle is at rest after its act of sewing is done, but the wicked are not satisfied even after their acts of slaughter are over. It dives in the dirt and rises in the air and flies with the wind and lies down wherever it falls. It sleeps in the dust and hides itself at home and in the inside and under the cloths and leaves. It dwells in the hand and ear holes, in lotuses and heaps of woolen stuff. It is lost in the holes of houses, in clefts of wood, and underneath the ground. Valmiki added, as the sage was speaking in this manner, the sun went down in the west and the day departed to its evening service. The assembly broke after mutual salutations to perform their sacred ablution and joined again on the next morning with the rising beams of the sun to the royal palace. Chapter 71, Suchi's Remorse. Vasishta continued. After the carnivorous fiend, Karkati, had feasted for a long period on the flesh and blood of humankind, she found her insatiable appetite to know no bounds. She was never satisfied with anything. She used to be satisfied with a drop of blood in the form of the needle. Now she became sorry at the loss of the insatiable thirst and appetite of her former state. She thought in herself, "Oh, pity it is that I came to be a vile needle." With so weak and slender a body, I can take nothing for my food. How foolish I have been to forego my former gigantic form and change my dark, cloudy figure for something like the dry leaf of a forest tree. Oh, wretch that I am, to have foregone my dainty food of flesh, flavored with fat. I am doomed to dive in dirt and drop down on the ground to be trodden and trampled under the feet of people, soiled and sullied in filth. Oh, me, miserable, helpless, and hopeless thing, without any support or status. From one sorrow I fall to another, and one danger is succeeded by another. I have no mistress or maidservant, no father or mother. I have no son or brother, nor anyone to serve or befriend me. I have nobody, no home, and no refuge or asylum anywhere. I have no fixed dwelling anywhere. Instead, I am driven about like falling leaves by driving wind. I am subject to all accident and exposed to every kind of calamity. I wish for my extinction, but its wishes do not approach to me. What have I done? In the foolishness of my heart, I have given away my own big body like a madman gives away a precious jewel for a paltry piece of glass. One calamity is enough to turn the brain out of order. But what will be my case when it is followed by other disasters in endless succession? I am hung up to be suffocated by smoke and dropped down in the streets to be trodden underfoot. I am cast away with dirt and hidden under grass to my great distress. I serve at another's will and am guided by my guide. I am stark naked while I sew for others, and I am ever a dependent on another's guidance. How long do I work and walk for small, worthless gain? And stitching alone is all the work that I have to perform for life. Oh, unlucky that I am. Even my bad luck is so very unlucky. With my remorse today, I see the demon of despair rising before me and threatening to make an end of this body, of which I have made an offering to him. After my foolishness, losing so big and bulky a body, what better fate can await me than to be annihilated into nothing, rather than be a thing which is good for nothing? What man will pick me up, who is as lean as a thread worm, from the heap of ashes under which I lie buried by the wayside? No keen-sighted man will take such a wretched and forlorn being into his consideration, just like nobody living on a high hill ever stoops to take notice of the grass growing on the ground below. I cannot expect to raise myself higher while I am lying in a sea of ignorance. What blind man, guided by the flash of firefly, can perceive the glorious sunlight? I find myself drowned in a sea of misery, and I know not how long I shall have to labor under my difficulties. When shall I be restored to the form of the daughter of Angangiri mountain and stand like a pillar over the ruins of the nether and upper world? When shall I have my arms reach the clouds and my eyes flashing like lightning, my clothes as white as snow, and my hair touching the sky? When will my big belly resemble a huge cloud, and my long breasts hang below like pillows, shaking with the motion of my body, dancing like the wings of a peacock? When will the ash-white light emitted by my laughter cast shade onto the sun, and my former high stature threaten to devour the terrible god of death? Some time ago, my hollow sockets, deep as the holes of mortars, flashing with living fire like the rays of the sun, and my large legs moved in my rambling like two monumental pillars. When shall I have my big belly with its huge pot belly? When shall I again have my soft black nail that resemble the dark and humid clouds of autumn? When will those tender smiles return to me, with which I move the great Rakshasa demons to my favor? When shall I dance in my giddy circle at the music of the tabor in the forest? When will that big belly of mine be filled with pots full of fattened liquor and be fed with heaps of flesh and bones from dead bodies? When shall I get drunk, drinking the blood of human gore, and become merry and giddy until I fall asleep? It was I, by my bad choice of austerity, who destroyed my former brilliant body and accepted this petty needle-like form, like one who takes the sulfate of gold instead of the precious metal. Ah, where is that huge body that filled all sides and shone like the dark hill of Anjanagiri? What is this puny and thin form in the shape of a spider's leg, thin and lean like a tender blade of grass? The ignorant, thinking it useless, throw a golden jewel on the ground like a piece of glass. So I have cast aside my shining body for a bit of this black needle. O great Vindhya mountains, with your hollows and snow-covered caves, why do you not destroy your dull elephants with your native lions? It is I who is as silly as an elephant on my arms that used to break down mountain peaks. Why do you fail to pluck the butter like moon with your moony nail? Oh, my breast that was as fair as snowy mountain peaks, even without my glassy ornaments. Why do you not show your hairs, which were as large as leeches that fed on lion's flesh? O my eyes that used to dispel the darkness of the darkest night, and kindle dry fire with your glaring fire. Why do you cease to lighten the air with your brightness? O my shoulder blades, why are you broken down and leveled with the earth? Or are you crushed and smashed or moldered and worn out by age? O my moon bright face, why do you not hide? Why do you not shine over me with your bright beams that resemble the everlasting light of the orb of the moon? Are you now at an end forever? O my hands, where is your strength fled today? Do you not see how I am transformed into an ignoble needle that is moved by the touch of the foot of a fly? Alas, the cavity of my navel was as deep as a well, and beset by hair resembling rows of beautiful plants about it. My protuberant posteriors were like the bottom of the Vindhya hill. Where is that towering statue, reaching to the sky? And what is this new, contemptible form of the needle? Where is that mouth, hollow as the vault of the sky? And what is this hole of the needle? Where is my heap of flesh? And what is this drop of watery food? Ah, how lean I have grown! But who is to be blamed for an act of my own doing? Chapter 72. Suchi again performs tapas. Vashishta continued. Afterwards, Suchi became silent and motionless and thought of resuming her austerities for the sake of regaining her long-lost body. With his intention, she returned to the Himalayas, where, abstaining from her desire of human gore, she sat repeating her criticisms and rebukes. In her mind, she saw her needle form entering into her heart with her breathing. Meditating on her mental form of the needle, she was blown upward by her vital breath to the top of the hill and alighted on it like a vulture from high. There she remained alone and apart from all living beings, setting amidst burning fire with her form of an ash-colored stone. She sat there like a sprout of grass, springing in that dry and grassless spot. But soon she faded away into a blade of withered hay in the sandy desert. She remained standing on the toe of one foot, and she continued criticizing and rebuking her own self. In her tiptoe position, she lightly touched the ground and avoided all sidelong looks. She gazed on the upper sky with her face upraised and her eyes uplifted. The fine point of the black iron needle penetrated the ground and firmly preserved its standing posture. It fed upon itself, upon the air which it inhaled by its uplifted mouth. The scarcity of food in the forest made her look like she was in search of some prey coming from a distance. Her shadow, shaking with the wind, enticed the unwary to approach towards it. The ray of light, issuing like a pencil from the needle hole, served as her attendant guard on the hinder part. As the men are kindly disposed toward the mean who are favorites to them, so the needle was attached to the thin pencil of light that became its constant attendant. The needle had another constant companion, the devotion in its own shadow. But the blackness of its body made it always remain behind the back. Thus these three, the iron needle, the thin pencil of light passing through its eye, and the needle's shadow, having firmly adhered themselves to the iron needle, become intimate friends, like all good people mutually assisting one another. On seeing Suchi in this plight, the trees and plants of the mountain forest felt compassion for her. Who is there who bears no sympathy for a pious devotee or for her penances and austerities? The needle that was stuck to the ground by its foot and had sprung up like some faculty of the mind was fed with the fragrance of fruits, blown and borne by the breeze to its uplifted mouth. Woodland gods and demigods continued to fill its mouth with the dust of buds and full-blown flowers of the woods. But Suchi did not swallow the powdered meat dust that God Indra had caused to be thrown into her mouth for the purpose of frustrating the effect of her tapas. Her fixity of purpose did not permit her to wallow the delicious powder because a person, however mean he may be, is sure of success by the firmness of his mind. Vayu, the god of winds, with its power of uprooting mountains, was astonished to find the needle adverse to swallowing the food. He administered to it in the form of the pollen of flowers. The resolute devotee is never shaken from his purpose, though he be plunged into mud or drowned in water or scattered by winds and thrown into burning fire, or when he is shattered by showers of hailstones or struck by lightning or battered by raindrops and intimidated by thunderclaps. The resolute mind is not changed in 1,000 years, and the feet of the firm, like those of the drowsy and dead drunk, never move from their place. A holy hermit who is devoted to his purpose, in time loses the motion of his external organs. but by the exercise of his reason, he obtains the light of true knowledge in his soul. Thus did Suchi gain the light of knowledge and become a seer of the past and future. She became cleansed of her impurity of sin, and her impurity, Vishuddhi, turned to purity, Suchi. She came to know the truly knowable in her own understanding. After the removal of her sins by tapas, she felt true bliss in her soul. She continued in her austere tapas for many thousands of years, to the great astonishment of 7 times 7 worlds that became frightened at her austerity. The fervor of her tapas set great mountains on fire, and that flame spread to all the world like the blaze of an auspicious meteor. Well, this has been quite the story, adventure of this Rakshasi. What are we learning here? The poetic verses are creating a rhythm that resonate with some of our own karmic traces, to be sure. And this resonance causes them to be enlivened. And when they become enlivened, they can then be balanced. We can only balance the karmic traces that are in our awareness, that come into our awareness. Those that are hidden deep are like hidden veins of minerals in a mountain. We don't even know they're there. We can't even touch them. But when they're on the surface, then the mantra, the focus of attention, will do its course and balance the karma. And so this is what is being talked about here, how she continued austere tapas, which means she continued to focus on meditation, taking her mind deeper and deeper with the mantra to the karmic traces. And these karmic traces were balanced. In fact, so many were balanced that it says 7 times 7 worlds became frightened at her austerity. So what does that mean? That means she is beginning to see the illusion of the world, because the meditations she is conducting have balanced so much of her karmic traces. So this is the story of every one of us as we go through this purpose of balancing our karmic traces to achieve moksha. Now we'll continue